these outcomes, but trying to link these outcomes to whether they could be caused by spam or not, by trying to measure an association between what group you were in, the spam users or the non-spam users, whether you did or did not develop cardiovascular disease, diabetes, or what have you. So we were trying to measure the effect of spam use. We didn't have these time machines, and what we're going to end up doing is coming up with a statistical measure of association to try to link the level of spam consumption to your risk of developing any of these various outcomes that were measured. So first we're going to talk about how we measure these outcomes, and then we're going to talk about how we can build measures of association to link these outcomes to risk factors. The risk factor of interest is whether you did or did not consume spam on a regular basis. So let's talk about the outcomes first. How do you measure these outcomes? And this is just a slide I put together of the various outcomes that people propose in those three study designs. You wanted to measure weight or weight gain. You might want to measure body mass index. You might want to measure certain physiologic parameters, blood pressure, cholesterol levels, triglyceride levels, fasting glucose levels, hemoglobin A1C. You might want to measure clinical outcomes, whether you're diagnosed with diabetes or cardiovascular disease. And you'd also want to measure quality of life. One person suggested measuring physical activities. These were outcomes that these three investigators decided, and I agree, are pertinent outcomes to measure if you want to ask what's the effect of eating spam, because these are the things that might be caused by spam consumption. Well, those are outcomes I want to talk about in a little bit more detail in a minute. To read papers that Marjorie and Erin sent me a couple of weeks ago, actually a couple of months ago, and I asked them to come up with some good papers that could be points of discussion. Hopefully in the future weeks we can make this a more interactive exchange of ideas. One of the papers I want you to read is by Tiara, if I'm pronouncing that name correctly. And one of the things she measured was ethnicity representation of subjects to see if they developed certain outcomes. And this is an example of what she used for different ethnic groups. Japanese, Caucasian, Hawaiian, Filipino, Chinese, mixed, or others. And let's suppose when we were collecting these data, we asked each individual to self-report the ethnic group they consider themselves most closely aligned to. If they answered Japanese, what we recorded in our data set was the number 1. If they answered Caucasian, what we recorded the number 2. So the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 were chosen to represent which category you self-reported belonging to in terms of race or ethnicity. Those were labels, numerical labels for those different categories. That's one type of measurement that we'll be talking about in a second. Here's another example. Let's suppose I was going to ask everyone today, how do you rate your health? How do you feel? And I gave you 5 options: excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. If you said excellent, I wrote down a 5. If you said very good, I wrote down a 4. If you said good, I wrote down a 3. So just like the previous example, this question has 5 categories. The previous example had 7. Each category is going to be represented by a number. 5 if you answered excellent, 1 if you answered poor. But in your mind, think about these 2 different questions. In both situations, a unique number, an integer, was assigned to represent a category. In the previous example, race, ethnicity, there was no order to those categories. One racial group is not higher on some scale than another racial group. But for this question, when I'm asking you to report your health status, I think we'd all agree that someone who says their health is excellent has better health than someone who says their health is very good, or fair, or poor. So here the numbers not only represent which category you would belong to, but the higher the number, we get a feeling for the better the quality of life, the better the health status. So the numbers here represent something more than the numbers in the previous slide were representing. Let me give you another example. We'll be talking about a paper that Marjorie wrote a couple of years ago. I think Marjorie was part of the project you did for your master's degree from Harvard. It meant trying to look at stages of change. A scientist by the name of Procrasta, developed 5 different stages that you go through when you implement a change in your lifestyle. So, for example, let's suppose Marjorie is a strong spam consumer. She has spam for breakfast, she has spam for lunch, and we are trying to change that habit. We develop an intervention, a culturally appropriate intervention to try to get Marjorie to wean herself off this heavy spam diet. These different numbers that are listed here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, are different stages that Marjorie might go through when she tries to develop um, a, uh, a sense of change in her lifestyle. One represents pre-contemplation, a stage where she's not even thinking about changing, but after she receives our intervention, she might switch into a contemplation stage where she's starting to think about things, think that she might want to change her diet. Stage 3, preparation, is when she actually starts planning to do this. She's decided to start. Plan 4 means she's in the process now. She's implementing this intervention. And stage 5 means not only she's intervened, but she's maintaining this change in her lifestyle. So one of the papers I'm going to ask you to read next week was written by her and published, where she talks about tracing people through 4 different stages of change: a pre-action stage, a contemplation stage, an action stage, and a maintenance stage. And for next week, I'm going to ask you to read that paper. Finally, let me give you one other example of an instrument where the numbers mean maybe even more. This is how we measure body mass index. If at the bottom of this slide, I give you a web address, the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. You can click on that or go to that address, and it will allow you to enter your height, enter your weight, and it will calculate your body mass index for you. And it will also give you different categories of body mass index classes by which your body mass index would fall into the group which is deemed to be underweight or normal weight or overweight or obese. So body mass index will give each person a number. And the number not only reflects the level they're at, that number also tells you whether that level is higher than or lower than someone else. So the numbers reflect not only order, they also reflect distance. Now, you guys are probably hearing a dog barking in the background. That's the risk of being at home. That's my dog barking at the mail person who's left something in the mailbox. I'll try to calm him down. Hold on a second. That happens every day, I think, around this time. Okay, getting back to where we are. So unlike the previous example, ethnicity, where the number just reflected a label, unlike the second example, where the number reflected